Not a problem.
Channel a little more.
You got it?
Got it. President George W. Bush interview. Take one. Marker. Soft sticks.
Give me 1 second, Patty. I just need to do one last thing.
Well, if you admire and love somebody, because first and foremost they were a devoted father, then that person's going to have an influence on your future. I never really thought I was going to be a politician. I'm pretty certain McCain didn't think he was going to be one either. We were both, maybe a little unsettled and a little kind of trying to find our way when we were younger. But in the end, our dads influenced some of the decisions we made as we became more responsible citizens. And I never knew John's dad, but I heard him talk about him with great fondness. I'm not sure we were that philosophical with each other. But it was pretty clear. I mean, when Laura and I went and visited he and Cindy and his place up there in northern Arizona, and you could get a sense for how family has influenced his life by the way he treats his own family. And I can remember asking John about his grandfather and father. And I can't remember the specifics of the conversation, but I can remember the tenor of the conversation and his dedication and his admiration for his dad and his grandfather. Yeah, no, he loves Sedona. God, we went over to visit him, and he was cooking some kind of barbecue with his neighbor, and he was like a kid, and he wanted to show me this particular hill, and it was really, you could tell. I mean, his enthusiasm was about as high as I'd ever seen during my time of knowing John. Well, first of all, I was surprised. I thought I was going to whip him. Of course, he thought he was going to whip me, and it was a turning point for me because, and for that I'm thankful that John beat me, because I needed to show people I could get off the mat. I mean, I was kind of the presumptive heir to the nomination, and McCain stepped up and whipped me good, and he outworked me, and he had a better message for New Hampshire. And so I told my team, look, let's view this as a blessing, not a defeat, and show the people we can bounce back. And so, the competition with John was tough. On the other hand, it made me a better candidate and person, for that matter. I had some good states ahead of me, and I'm one of these guys. I'd figured out quite a while ago that winning and losing wasn't what mattered in life. In the end, I'd watched my dad lose for the U.S. Senate statewide, and I watched my dad lose statewide 3 times in Texas. And the lesson there is that if you allow political defeat to define you, you'll lose the most important things in life, like family and faith. And he didn't, and he bounced back and became president, having lost. So I wasn't all that. I never ran scared I was going to lose. But I was, and I knew John would be a tough competitor, and all that defeat did was make me work harder. I don't think my side said that, and if they did that, I'd have fired them. I mean, I think that that there are some sideliners, people who claim they were for so-and-so who floated stuff out. Yeah, it got testy. It got testy because third-party people made it testy. I never really felt the race in South Carolina, or anywhere for that matter, breached my friendship with John. My admiration for him did not change in the course of a heated primary. I remember pulling out I think he accused me of dirty campaigning, and I pulled out some flyer that said "Paid for by John McCain." Yeah, I do remember that. And Alan Keyes was still in the race, and I remember John and Alan got in a little bit of a spat during a commercial. This was one of those debates where they actually had commercials, And so you're kind of sparring, and you're thinking about answers and stuff. Then all of a sudden, we're now taking a break. And then so the three of us would sit there with Larry King. And yeah, I remember it. People look back at that kind of that period and say, man, you guys must have really been antagonistic toward each other. And I didn't feel that way at all. And I don't think John did in the end either. I mean, look, we were kind of semi-war horses at that point who'd seen a lot. And no question it was spirited. I think any of the kind of antagonism as a result of that race really resulted from, fringe supporters. He had fringe supporters saying ugly things about me, and I'm confident some of my fringe supporters said ugly things about him. And when I think about it, when I reflect upon my own feelings about John, as I say, they didn't change. As a matter of fact, when he whipped me in New Hampshire, it increased my admiration for him. We had I think a meeting in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, if I'm not mistaken. We met in a hotel there, and the reason I remember that is because that's the same time that our old manager of the Texas Rangers, Bobby Valentine, had the Mets in the hotel. They were playing the Pirates, and so on that day I met with John and Bobby Valentine. Separate occasions, I might add, but yeah. We had a good visit. Look, I had campaigned with John for my dad in '88. I had seen what a stalwart. If he's for you, he's a stalwart. I mean, there's no backing off, and so yeah, we had a nice visit. And then I think one of the first events we did together was on a bus tour coming down the Panhandle of Florida, and there were big crowds. I mean, really big. And I think John could sense that something was happening in the general election that was positive, and so yeah, he was on board. It was okay. I mean, it was good, except, John's an independent cuss at times. And just because I was for something didn't necessarily make him for it. And so there were moments where he was a defender, a stalwart defender, and there was moments when he took an opposite point of view, but never was the respect and friendship diminished. He was very respectful of the presidency, very respectful. And and around me, he was, a gentleman, and I never seen him get angry. First of all, he understood the nature of the conflict. There were some who, kind of wanted a limited response and maybe hold these people at bay. John understood this was a war, and that during war, the United States must use the assets at its disposal to defeat the enemy, which meant go on the offense. And so in Afghanistan and Iraq, he was not only supportive of the reason why we did this, holding people to account or trying to prevent an attack before it came, but once in, he was supportive. Now look, like a lot of people, including me, we were critical of some decisions made and needed to adjust. But in the end, John understood the stakes. So, for example, on the surge, there was no stronger supporter on the surge than John McCain, which was very important because his voice has enormous credibility in the Senate, and it worked. I think it's different. I think, well, first of all, it's a different kind of war.
Yeah, totally.
But, it's hard for me. Maybe somebody else can draw that conclusion. I can't. There's a lot of stuff, a lot of rumors, and a lot of stuff around politics. And no, I wasn't the least bit concerned. One of the roles of the legislative branch is hold the executive branch to account. And that's what he was doing. And I understand the nature of checks and balances. And sometimes John was a pretty significant check. He's a great senator. And, one of the things that makes him an interesting person, he's unpredictable. On foreign policy and military matters, he's very predictable because he understands the military as well as anybody in the Senate. I've always been an executive branch guy, and all I can tell you is he has great respect for the U.S. Senate, its traditions, its rules, and its history. I think Lindsey Graham told me, his good friend Lindsey, and I have talked to John since then, check on him, see how he's doing, and there's no doubt in my mind he'll battle. And, Laura and I, the reason I called him is I wanted him to know that Laura and I wish he and Cindy all the best. And to the extent that he thinks prayers help, I'm offering mine. He'll be remembered as a great public servant. He'll be remembered not only as someone who endured a horrible 5.5 years and came out with the desire to make a positive contribution in life, but as a great U.S. Senator. I mean, somebody who, in the tradition of a lot of senators, some really good senators, who were independent of mind, but solid in principle. And people look at McCain with admiration. Campaigning for my dad, he was a big George H.W. Bush supporter. I'm sure they had become acquainted when Dad was vice president, and John, I think he was in the Senate in '88. So he was. I met John. I must have met him before, but I remember him at a big 41 rally, and man, he was very fired up. And when John gets fired up, he gets fired up, and he was strong for Dad. And so here's the McCain story for you. My last debate ever, my whole life, my last political debate was in 2004 in Arizona. And I'm getting ready to go on stage at Arizona State University against John Kerry. And I was ready for it. I felt good about it. And we had a room with friends that were up there. And I think my daughter was there, or maybe both of them were there. Laura was there. A couple of senators and buddies from Arizona. They're kind of mingling around, and I'm over there trying to kind of get the zen of debate, kind of relax. And I look down, and there's McCain, who is crouched right in front of me, about this far from my face, saying, just relax. And I'm saying to myself, man, how can I relax when you're yelling, relax? Anyway, he was, basically it's his way of saying, I'm wishing you well. Go get him. John came to the realization that that Vietnam could be an ally, which is ironic. I think it speaks highly of his character. I suspect that when you get through with all this and start editing, you're going to find out that that maybe the title ought to be A Man of Character. Well, I don't know how much money your budget is, but I'm on a pension.
That'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, it'd be kind of interesting to paint a portrait of John McCain. It'd be, as a painter, oftentimes a painting should reflect your kind of inner thoughts and your emotions, and I would paint him with affection.